So I'm Louise, I'm Deputy Director of the Fairer Start mission, and for those who don't know Nesta, we're the UK's innovation agency for social good. We design, test and scale new solutions to society's biggest problems. And Nesta has been around for over 20 years, but we've only had our current strategy since 2021. We have a really ambitious vision at Nesta that by 2030, in 6 years' time, we want to have significantly improved the lives of millions of people. And we have 3 missions at Nesta. These are a fairer start, which is focused on improving early years outcomes. This is the mission I'll be talking to you about today. But we also have 2 other missions, a healthy life focused on reducing obesity, and a sustainable future, which is focused on reducing household carbon emissions. A quick note on how we work at Nesta. So our mission team in Fairer Start is a multidisciplinary team with embedded staff from a range of practices who bring specific skills and expertise. And some of these types of expertise we draw on in our mission team include behavioural science, design and technology, including a particular emphasis on digital tech, arts and data science. And we work together in mixed methods teams to explore and solve different research and implementation problems and design new solutions. The mission team I'm based in, called A Fairer Start, has a mission to eliminate the school readiness gap between children from disadvantaged backgrounds and their peers. We do this by designing, testing and scaling solutions that drive the change needed. And all of our work is aiming to improve the types of support received by children and their families during the earliest years of life. And so I have turned my title into a question. The question you can see here on this slide is the question that really motivates all of my work at Nesta. How can we design evidence-based parenting support for impact at scale? I put it as a question because I certainly don't have the answer, but I do have a lot of ideas. And I'd like to share with you this morning a range of research and evidence that has really shaped my thinking. First, I'm going to set the stage for the type of impact at scale that I think we're aiming to achieve. So returning to my team's mission goal, we want to eliminate the school readiness gap between children born in deprivation and their peers by 2030. This is a UK-wide goal, and we're still refining how best to define disadvantage given the variations in data that are collected across the UK, and I'll take you through some different ways that we're thinking about it. While this is a really hard goal, we believe it's not impossible, and the most important things I think this goal gives us is a sense of urgency and the need to be ambitious to achieve a very large-scale impact. So, how's it going? This graph shows analysis from the Education Policy Institute using data from England. It shows that currently at the end of reception year of primary school, children eligible for free school meals are 4.6 months behind other children in their educational progress. We can see that here, while previously the trajectory was heading in the right direction and the gap was getting smaller, since 2019 the gap has started widening again. The gap is still wider than it was in the 5 years before the pandemic. And a reminder about why this matters. This matters because the Education Policy Institute have estimated that for children on free school meals, about 40% of the gap that has emerged by the time they finished school was already there by the time they turned 5. And that's why I think our mission goal is so important. The early years are a key opportunity to prepare children from lower income backgrounds for the rest of their life, and in particular so they can get the best out of their education. So, how do we define disadvantage? Looking at how we might define disadvantage in the early years, one way to look at it is at children who are living in poverty, which is defined as relative low income, and that's currently about 30% of children across the UK. If we look at how disadvantage is defined in the education system, free school meals is often used as a proxy. But if we look at data in England from last year, that picks up only around 18% of children who are eligible for free school meals. So clearly not all of the children living in poverty are actually falling into this category. It's also important to note at this point that out of the children who are eligible for free school meals, it's around half who are not on track with their development to age 5. That amounts to around 53,000 children. It's not the whole cohort. And to reach our mission goal, we will need to identify disadvantaged children who are at risk of falling behind and provide their family with support before they turn 5. With young children, it's actually not easy to predict which children might need additional help and which won't. So one way to close the gap would be to offer some support to all economically disadvantaged families with children aged under 5. Of course, families will have different needs and will benefit from different types and levels of support. This slide shows what kind of scale we might need to reach in total if we're actually going to achieve that mission goal. If we were to target all children aged 0 to 5 who are in the bottom quarter for family income, that would be over £1 million each year across the whole of the UK. And you can see the individual figures for each UK nation here on this slide. Of course, this is a pretty crude way of looking at it, but I think it's a helpful illustration of the type of numbers we're talking about. It's a lot. So, what's actually driving the gap? Before we start looking at solutions, I think it's really helpful to get into a bit more detail about why this problem is emerging in the first place. Why are children from economically disadvantaged families experiencing poorer outcomes? And I always want to start with this point. That income does not determine parenting or child outcomes. Otherwise, you might think I'm being overly reductive or undermining the skills and resourcefulness of parents and children from lower income backgrounds. What we're really talking about here is heightened risk, which looks different in every family, and it affects families in different ways. Using the data from England, I think it's a good starting point to recognise that around half of economically disadvantaged children are on track at age 5 and half aren't. So here we're really concerned with the 48% who are falling behind, and the aim is to accelerate their progress in the early years so they can keep pace with their peers and have a good experience of childhood. So what are the drivers of inequalities? Why are we seeing some disadvantaged children falling behind? I think it's useful to look at data from the Millennium Cohort Study, which tracked a representative sample of children from birth through to adulthood. A recent study by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, analysing MCS data, found that by age 3 we can already see a strong positive correlation between children's development and their family income. What this looks like is that children in the poorest 10% of families rank 31 percentiles lower in cognitive development and 24 percentiles higher in emotional and behavioural difficulties versus children who are in the richest 10% of families. Children's early educational environment was actually the most important influence on their cognitive development. This includes the mother's level of education, her language skills, as well as the frequency of stimulating activities at home. The emotional environment in a child's family is the most dominant factor that's associated with whether or not they have emotional and behavioural difficulties. Their emotional environment includes daily routines, the parent-child relationship, interparental relationships, and the mother's mental health. Those are factors captured in the study, but also, of course, there are other factors that are important too. So, untangling income and parenting. Does that mean that children from economically disadvantaged families are all missing out on nurturing and stimulating care? No, clearly that is not the case. Mellish and Gardner recently carried out analysis for Nesta of the SEED dataset. This is a longitudinal study of 5,600 children in England. This analysis found there were two major dimensions of childhood disadvantage, which were economic disadvantage and home disadvantage. Home disadvantage, represented here in the green circle on the right-hand side of the slide, combines indicators of home learning activities as well as indicators relating to the emotional environment in the home. And this analysis found that economic disadvantage primarily influences children's cognitive outcomes, while home disadvantage affects children's socio-emotional outcomes. The study also found that children experiencing both types of disadvantage have considerably poorer outcomes across all measures compared to non-disadvantaged children. I think these findings are important to remind us that economic disadvantage in itself can influence children's outcomes, even when parents are providing the type of parenting that we know most benefits children. So, to shed some light on this, I thought I would share some findings from some recent research, which was actually led by Simran, who is here today. And so it's research that our team did with parents affected by the two-child limit. This is a policy that restricts welfare benefits, including universal credit payments and tax credits, to the first two children in a family. And when we interviewed parents affected by the two-child limit, they told us that they had difficulty affording basic necessities. They were accumulating debt just to survive. And they were having to sacrifice their basic needs in order to prioritise their children's needs. We learned that children living in families with very low incomes who were affected by the two-child limit, compared to their older siblings who grew up without being affected by the two-child limit, they had less time in formal childcare, they had less access to learning resources, they had fewer opportunities to take part in enriching activities, going to the museum, visiting things in the community. They had fewer opportunities to socialise with their peers. I think this is a very useful illustration to see how economic factors can influence children's development independently of parenting. We also learned from our qualitative research with parents that the severe financial hardship being experienced by families affected by the two-child limit might be influencing children's outcomes via two main routes. So firstly, as we've mentioned, via the material resources available in the family, and secondly, via the parental stress that's experienced as a result of that really severe financial hardship. And the diagram on this slide shows how these factors of material resources and parental stress might interact to influence child outcomes via health, nutrition, and the home learning environment. But also a kind of cautionary note that place matters too. It's not just about what happens in the home. So before we move on, I just wanted to include some other Nesta research findings that highlight the importance of place. This graph shows analysis carried out by data scientists in our mission team. On this graph, each of these dots represents a single local authority in England, and the pink dots represent London local authorities. The vertical axis shows the percentage of children on free school meals who are on track at age 5, and the horizontal axis shows deciles on the index of multiple deprivation. Decile 1 is the most deprived areas, and decile 10 is the least deprived areas. While it's a pretty messy picture, what the graph shows is that on average, children eligible for free school meals living in more affluent areas actually had worse outcomes than children living in poorer areas. We don't know why this might be. It could be due to the funding available. Where there are fewer children, they might attract less funding to provide support. It could be about how services are set up, or it could be about the low visibility of poorer children's needs when they're hidden in a more affluent population of children. I think it's a useful illustration of how we're going to need different solutions for different children and their families, delivered in different ways, and that suit the very different contexts where they live. So before I move on, a quick summary. Existing evidence seems to suggest that many poorer children are falling behind their peers due to the direct impact of economic disadvantage, particularly on their cognitive development, and in some cases due to an environment at home that isn't providing the educational and emotional support that most benefits children's development. And also due to less access to and take-up of early childhood education, as we heard about in the two-child limit research. We can also see that geographical context matters, and some children may be living in a community that provides them and their family with lower support. So back to the question guiding this presentation. How can we design evidence-based parenting support for impact at scale? I'll explore some of the evidence we have about what makes a difference, as well as exploring what the implications are for delivery at scale. I'll also share my thoughts on where some of the most exciting opportunities for innovation lie. And I'd like to start with this quote from a report by Kitty Stewart and Jane Waldfogel, which shows that not a lot has actually changed in the last 7 years. They said that carefully designed programs drawing on a growing evidence base can play a role in reducing disparities in early childhood, although delivering them effectively at scale remains challenging, and I think we would all probably agree with that. So with that in mind, what actually looks promising? I'll start by looking at some examples of parenting support that has been shown to be high impact but is potentially harder to scale. I'll then look at some types of support that are most scalable, some of which don't yet have a strong evidence of impact. So starting with highest impact, one of the most promising high-impact interventions we've seen in the UK is integrated family support in community-based children's centres. For those who aren't as familiar with it, Sure Start launched its first 15 local programmes in 1999, and the services on offer included health services, parenting support, outreach and home visiting, early learning and childcare, and parental employment support. Sure Start centres were then rolled out to every community, and by 2010, there were 5,300 Sure Start centres in England. The recent evaluation of Sure Start, published by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, has shown that Sure Start was effective in narrowing the disadvantage gap. As you can see on this graph, with thanks to Sarah Catton, who made this graph, children who lived in Sure Start areas experienced substantially larger effects on their test scores if they were eligible for free school meals, compared to those who weren't. So Sure Start was a gap narrower. And what does research suggest makes for a really effective integrated early years offer? Well, picking on the different kind of evidence sources that I know of, this research indicates that an integrated local early years offer should include policies and support to improve income for the poorest families, parenting support to improve children's early home environment, access to high-quality early childhood education and family health services, and crucially outreach in more deprived areas to encourage families to use services. And finally, there's also some evidence to suggest that it's important that consultation happens with local parents and caregivers to make sure that that service offer is really responding to what they want and what they need and what will get them in there. So why aren't we currently offering this type of service to communities consistently in the UK? Well, obviously it requires a lot of funding, and in recent years that government commitment to funding this type of offer in every community at the level that we've previously seen hasn't been there. This graph shows how Sure Start spending rose to a height of getting close to £2 billion per year in 2010, and it's fallen substantially since then. While the current family policy builds on the legacy of Sure Start, the funding is still substantially less, and we're also seeing only half of English local authorities who are receiving government funding. I expect many of us are hoping to see some positive policy developments in this space following the recent change of government. Moving on, what else has shown high impact? Well, some of the strongest evidence is for long-term holistic one-to-one support. The Family Nurse Partnership is a fantastic example of this. First-time mothers who receive support from a family nurse, they get home visits from the same family nurse every 1 to 2 weeks, from 16 weeks into their pregnancy until their child is between 1 and 2 years old. And with all of this one-to-one time, it's possible to have a really holistic focus on health, child development, and helping mothers reach their personal goals. Evaluations in the UK have found that Family Nurse Partnership successfully improved school readiness at age 5 and reading scores at Key Stage 1. And the Family Nurse Partnership has been scaled widely in the UK. It's currently available in 51 English local authorities and 11 health boards in Scotland. But there are many areas where it's still not available, probably due to the high costs involved in delivering it and also the skilled workforce that's needed. So Family Nurse Partnership is probably one of the most effective parenting support interventions that we have, but in its current form, it's hard to scale to the level that we would need to see to achieve the kind of reach that we're going to need to close that gap. So with that in mind, what else might we need in the picture that's more scalable? So what's most scalable? Some of the most scalable evidence-based parenting interventions that we have available are group-based parenting interventions. They're substantially lower in cost because they typically allow practitioners to work with up to 12 parents at the same time. And you can see 2 examples here, Level 4 Group Triple P and Empowering Parents, Empowering Communities. Each of these costs less than £100 per family, so we're reducing cost here, it's getting more scalable, and it's been found effective in reducing behavioural problems in young children. Both of these interventions have strong impact evidence. So why aren't we currently delivering these programmes at a very wide scale? Well, these programs are going to be great for some parents, but they're not going to meet everyone's needs. Not all parents can travel to access in-person support. Group sessions have to happen at fixed times, so they won't necessarily have the flexibility that parents need to fit in their schedule. And there's evidence to suggest that while they work, these types of programs may not be reaching enough parents from economically disadvantaged backgrounds and those from minoritized ethnic groups. And that NIHR is currently looking to fund research about how we can improve take-up and access for these groups. Local early years services also don't have enough capacity to deliver these programs at a high enough volume to achieve the step change that we need. But it's very hard to know how much delivery is actually taking place nationally because we absolutely do not have the data on that. So, what are we seeing that has the most promise in terms of scalability? In my view, we need to think a lot more seriously about digital parenting interventions. Recent research tells us that 98% of parents of children aged under 3 now have a smartphone. There are huge opportunities for low-cost digital delivery via text, video, apps, video calls, AI chatbots, and digital assistants. And there are also huge benefits for parents because digital approaches allow a much greater flexibility. Parents can access self-service content at times that suit them. People living in rural areas can access support without having to travel long distances. And there's a small but growing evidence base. For example, Triple P Online is as effective as face-to-face support, and it requires much less practitioner time. So why aren't we just sort of completely focusing on digital now? Well, even digital solutions require time and effort from the early years system to make them effective. You need outreach and engagement to get parents to sign up in the first place. Without a person giving encouragement, many parents are likely to drop out. And as we haven't been delivering digital interventions in the UK for very long, there's not yet enough evidence about how to effectively recruit parents and keep them engaged. There are signs of promise, but impact evidence is still at a fairly early stage. To make an impact at scale, we need to be confident that the interventions that we're investing in are effective. So, based on these opportunities and challenges, some of the questions we're most interested in at Nesta are, can we make impactful support more scalable? And secondly, can we make low-cost digital support more impactful? I've included this quote here because I think it's a really good summary of where we're probably going wrong currently. It's a quote from a recent report by the Behavioural Insights team for Nesta, looking at enablers for scaling parenting interventions. The intervention developer said, "I find that often the facilitator and the parent are the last two elements in a scaling strategy. People decide on the number of locations to scale in, the model to use, and the stakeholders to engage, and then facilitators and parents are the afterthought, rather than recognising them as the intervention's focal point." So in our work at Nesta, we're really trying to take an opposite approach and make sure that we're designing scalable support offers with involvement from parents that we're seeking to reach. And I think behavioural science can be really helpful here, so I've included the Behavioural Insights team's EAST framework. If we're going to design evidence-based parenting support for impact at scale, then it needs to be easy for parents. They can engage with minimum effort, which might be at home, at a local venue, or via their phone. It needs to be timely. The information and support they're being given is exactly relevant to the stage their child is at, and they don't have to join a waiting list. It needs to be attractive. This means the support meets the parent's needs. They might need advice, company, fun, or reassurance. It will be different for each person. And also importantly, it needs to be in line with what they're socially comfortable with. Accessing parenting support needs to feel like a normal thing to do. And so I thought I would finish with a case study to bring to life the type of projects that we're working on at Nesta. You can also hear about some of our other work in other sessions that are happening today. We've recently kicked off a partnership with the BBC Education team and Sheffield University on a digital text messaging programme that shares the BBC's Tiny Happy People videos with parents. Parents sign up when their child is around 6 months old, and they receive 3 messages each month until their child is 2. Each message includes a link to watch a short video from the Tiny Happy People website, which shares parenting skills and activities to help young children's language development. Small-scale impact evaluation of this text messaging programme has shown that parents who received videos were more likely to have improved their linguistic responsiveness compared to the control group. And Nesta is now collaborating on a project with the BBC and Sheffield University because we want to explore together whether we can increase the reach and impact of this programme. So starting with reach, we're designing a live landing page with parents to encourage them to sign up. We're involving parents from diverse backgrounds to explore how we can make the whole offer as accessible as possible. This includes the design and content of messages and the language options available. We're also planning work with early years services to explore referral routes to get parents to sign up and improve the design from service providers' perspective. If it's useful to them, they're more likely to invest time in getting parents to engage. And we're looking at how we can get the cost per family as low as possible. Our current estimate would put it under £3 per parent, but it would be great if it was even less than that. In the future, we'll want to test different recruitment channels to see which are most effective at helping our target families to engage. And then looking at how we could increase impact, we're exploring how we can make the content more holistic, so it's a bit broader than children's language development and also supports children's social and emotional development. We're going to work with parents to iterate and improve the content of messages with the aim of increasing their engagement and the number of times that each parent clicks through to watch a video. And we're also exploring how we can improve personalisation for parents so they have more choice about the topics they receive messages about and where messages are sent. By designing this programme very closely with economically disadvantaged parents, we can hope to create something that's really attractive and low cost as well as impactful to maximise the chances of achieving impact at scale. And so my final message is more of the same isn't going to achieve the impact at scale that we need. To close the gap at age 5, we might need to reach over 1 million children in the UK every year with effective evidence-based support. This means doing things differently. We need joined up and integrated family support in every area. We need to combine parenting support with resources to help combat families' economic disadvantage. We need to fund and scale up effective parenting interventions more systematically. We need to use digital tools and channels to increase the reach and accessibility of services and reduce delivery costs. And we need to build more evidence about how to engage parents effectively so they are willing to access parenting support and stay engaged for long enough so that it can make a difference. And finally, the scale of the challenge is clearly huge. We need innovation and research to build evidence of new ways of doing things. This will require collaboration between a very wide range of stakeholders, including policymakers, funders, researchers, service designers, and implementers, people in this room. And there are huge opportunities to make an impact at scale if we all think big and we work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. That was great. Please join me in thanking Louise.